In those years, especially on Wall Street and all stock markets in the United States, a carbon technology began to be used. Because the increase in trading volume and the variety of shares traded has led to a rapid flow of money. Meanwhile, it was one of the other important factors that accelerated the flow of capital in Europe to the United States in World War I. As Europe floated in debt, wealth was piling up in the US. The stock market continued to rise. Let them do it, it represented the dominant thought. However, there were also people like Herbert Hoover, the Secretary of Commerce, who thought that the end of this rise in the United States would lead to disappointment. Taylorism and increased profitability in industry. The economic system, which was extremely limited in control, also began to rapidly increase the number of monopolies in the United States. By 1929, the wealth of half the companies in the United States was under the control of several companies. President J. Calvin Coolidge was happy with the situation. Especially known as Taylorism, between 1921 and 1928 the index of industrial production in the United States rose from 67 points to 110. Born into a wealthy Quaker family, Frederick Winslow Taylor, thanks to the production organization he developed, caused industrial profitability to rise and product prices to fall. A method that analyzes the production process by breaking it into pieces and reuniting it in the most efficient and harmonious way leads to the purchase of more products with the same income, but it was not very useful to the working class with average knowledge and experience. This method would also be implemented in Europe and many socialist countries in the following periods. In the United States, the 1920s were periods when wealth increased, real estate investments increased noticeably, and land annuities grew. Again, in the same years, Americans began to almost scramble through borrowing cars whose price was about US $876. In 1929, 21.6 million cars and 3.1 million trucks were registered for traffic, accounting for 78% of the world's automobile stockpile. Meanwhile, the balloon, which grew in excess of increased production and efficiency, continued to swell. Cheating, greed and an unwise understanding of investment, that is, in short, the panic that has reached the size of madness, closed the mind's eye. Because everyone wanted their share of this madness, and they didn't want to miss the opportunity. In the 5 years that the panic turned into collapse, Americans were largely indebted and turned into stock investors. As a result of this madness, an investor who invested $10,000 in GM shares in 1920, the amount of this investment by 1929, $1.490.000 was reaching dollars. For example, in 1929, the share of a radio company rose from $1.5 to $570 in April 1929. Although this share has never distributed dividends. In the presidential election contest in 1928, the American people were convinced of the dream by the campaigns carried out in the form of poverty has come to an end. But there were those, such as Roger Babson, a professor of statistics and mathematics, who warned that the outcome of this dream would end in disappointment. But those who issued such warnings were accused of being playful and even traitors. Babson preferred to adapt Isaac Newton's laws of physics to stock markets instead of making money from stock markets. Babson was not against the stock market, and he also believed in the necessity of this market. But he believed that the laws of impact response would work in this market as well. But by 1929, the stock market had risen 125% from nearly 2 years earlier. No one believed in the collapse scenario. Market forecasting and economists. Hope traders gave the stock market the necessary support. Irving Fisher, a Yale University professor who has made great strides in grasping the secrets of the money device, which has a vital link between microeconomics and macroeconomics, was one of these supporters. Fisher, who developed the functions of the marginalist and benefit equation in neoclassical economics and had what was called the largest doctoral dissertation in economics to that day, with his doctoral dissertation, which he wrote under the name Mathematical Reviews in the Theory of Price and Value, aimed to become rich. For this purpose, in 1920, he developed the plug method known today as Rolodex and patented it and began selling it. Fisher had become wealthy by 1925 and was a sought-after market forecaster of the market. Fisher, who sent his book The Money Illusion to Italian dictator Benito Mussolini in 1928, where he heard that he was closely interested in money issues, and asked for his support for a money conference to be held, hoped to advise Mussolini, but Mussolini did not respond. but Mussolini reported reading the book. The wealthy economist became known as the soothsayer of Wall Street in the 1920s. Fisher viewed the stock market frenzy as a reflection of the new era of sustained prosperity in America. If there was a problem, the newly formed American Central Bank would step in and prevent the crisis. Fisher convinced himself of that. He invested everything he had in the stock market. He wanted to become more rich, and the value of his portfolio reached $10 million at the highest level of the index. Fisher accused his close friend Babson of disastrous wiretapping in the fall of 1929. There may be a recession in stock prices, but a collapse is certainly out of the question, he said. October collapse of 1929. History shows who was right in two close friends' argument. For 2 months as a result of this controversy, Fisher seemed to be right. On October 16, Fisher said the stock market had reached what appears to be the highest plateau. But it was not possible to stay on this plateau throughout October. The stock market began to decline, and on October 21, 1929, the stock exchange experienced a large volume change of hands. On October 24, the stock market had no one left to keep its cool. The collapse was unstoppable. The Dow Jones Industrial Average had reached a ceiling of 381 on September 3, 1929. By the end of 1929, the index had dropped to 200. European stock markets were no different. At the end of 1929, the index of European stock markets was only 20% above its value in 1919. Stock markets such as Japan and Australia were hardly affected by their remoteness. At the end of 1929, Fisher fervently defended his thesis, writing a book called The Collapse of the Stock Market and Its Aftermath. I declared my views in September. Before the panic, I said that I had reached the top of the market, and the developments proved it. Again, I expressed the view that the recession would not be a collapse, and I was wrong about that. Again, I had predicted that this new plateau of share prices would continue to exist even in the event of any recession. This has been proven. At least in the near future, the landscape is bright. Fisher's morale to markets hasn't materialized. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell to the 40s in 1932. So between 1929 to 1932, the stock market collapse reached 90%. Although Fisher warned President Hoover about improvements in economic policy and the abandonment of the gold standard, the result did not change. America entered the Great Depression, which would last about 10 years. Unemployment rises to 25%. Finally, about Fisher. Was wrong. He wasn't just wrong. He suffered great losses. He lost his investments and home, estimated at between $7 and $30 million, according to estimates. It hit rock bottom in 1931. The massive debt mire has led to a life of terrible fights with federal tax officials over their previous earnings. He survived bankruptcy with the $100,000 his wife's sister gave him, but he floated in debt. Although his search continued in the following years, he died in 1947 as a broken heart. You can find the sources I used in the video in the description section. Don't forget to comment and subscribe to your thoughts.